The making Chinese companies delist on the stock market if they don't actually allow audits to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that has been so long coming that I think that whole thing was maybe started in the Obama administration.
Yeah, but because it's crazy that, any foreign company that lists on U.S. stock markets has to be audited. But China just said, nah, that's all state secrets.
And basically they would let the Chinese arms of these like Western companies, like they would let the Chinese arm or Chinese partner of PricewaterhouseCoopers audit their books, but not the actual American firm. And you can never take the books out of China and nobody would actually know what they said. So like that Chinese firm would be like, everything's cool. And you'd have to just trust them.
And then Luckin Coffee committed massive fraud on the scale of $300 million. And it's like, oops. They did pay a fine for it, but I think the fine was only $180 million. So it was like they really got only a slap on the wrist for an incredibly massive fraud, and a fraud that probably would not have happened if the PCAOB, the U.S. regulator, had been allowed to actually get access to their books ahead of time.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't be allowed to list.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're trying to relist again, which is stupid.
Well, yeah, I mean, so the pressure was on, and they were going to kick all these Chinese companies off of the U.S. stock exchange, but then the CCP actually bowed to real pressure.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
a lesson.
that was the culmination of a long time and I think that is a lesson that like if you have something that the CCP wants badly enough, and they came to the realization that they didn't actually want 200 plus Chinese companies to get kicked off the U.S. stock market, then they will actually bow and do something that they're supposed to be doing in the first place.
What is strange is there is a lot of continuity in the U.S. government in regards to China, and we're seeing the Biden administration take a lot of actions against trade in China. Also, and we'll get to it more later, with the potential new surge of COVID coming from China. There's the U.S. is also making Chinese travelers submit a positive test
or
a negative
test.
Positively negative. And these are very similar to things that happened in the Trump administration, but the U.S. media is reacting very differently.
Well,
to a
no,
lot of this.
Don't worry, Chris. They still called that racist. We'll get to that a little later.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was worried that something wouldn't be labeled racist.
Don't worry, CNN came through.
Ah, thank you. Hey, you know what else happened this year? CNN Plus. Was that what it was called? CNN Plus?
Was it called that? I can't even remember. The thing that totally crashed and burned, right? Yeah. Turns out that people don't want to pay an extra streaming subscription to watch CNN personalities cook or whatever that was going on.
Who'd have guessed? Who'd have guessed? So yeah, I think to sum up the Biden administration China policy, there is a lot of cause for celebration and cautious optimism, I think.
Well, I mean, I think we have to keep a good eye on what they're doing, and they don't have a free pass. You know what I mean?
No, definitely
There's always like I said, the danger is that as the CCP maybe is going to wise up a little bit in the next few months as they try to rebuild their economy, they might start to act more conciliatory.
Yeah.
They might back off the wolf warrior stuff a little bit. And if that happens, are we going to fall for it again?
That'll be
yes. Yes. I'd like to fall for it again.
It's like falling in love.
You want to be consistent at least. Well, so one of the it's not just zero COVID that was crashing the Chinese economy this year, because one of the earlier things that had been crashing China's economy is the sort of massive failure of Evergrande, which actually happened at the end of 2021, but really kind of came to fruition in 2022.
Don't worry, the government's going to bail them out.
Yeah, but there were these massive protests in the summer where people were because they bought their Evergrande and other real estate companies had sold apartments that hadn't been built yet, but people wanted to get them early, so they pay up, and theoretically that money is supposed to go towards that specific apartment building, but in reality, Evergrande was using them to complete earlier projects and essentially turning it into a pyramid scheme where there was never actually the money for the current thing.
90% of new homes in China are pre-sold like that.
Which is crazy that you would be like, all right, well, I'm going to start paying a mortgage towards something that doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
Right. But there's such a craze for real estate in China.
Well, because like for a long time, you couldn't invest in anything else.
Right.
Yeah, that's why
And-
it's like 30% of the GDP.
But then now that you can invest in other stuff, a lot of real estate companies are getting involved in that too, which is like all these like loan products, right? Which is
Right.
part of the reason that Evergrande failed. It wasn't just their like the stupid way that they were doing real estate projects. It was also that they were speculating in the like kind of the loan market where you would basically loan your money to Evergrande and they would promise you some crazy double-digit return.
Yeah. I mean,
And-
when could repackaging loans into complicated collateralized debt obligations ever cause a problem down the line?
I'm
Put
not
that
even
on the
sure.
t-shirt.
I'm not even sure it's as complicated as that was, right? It was kind of like people were loaning their money to Evergrande, which was promising the return, but Evergrande wasn't using them to sell and repackage as other debt. They were essentially using that to fund the real estate stuff.
As far as we know.
Yeah, as far as we know. But anyway, the point is that like when the real estate stuff starts to collapse, then all this money that people were loaning to Evergrande also started to blow up. So you had even Evergrande employees protesting because they were forced to buy all of these like loan products essentially. And then they were like, I want my money back. Like, not only am I not getting paid,
Yeah.
but like you have my money.
It was a big year of protests. And yeah, people were out protesting this. And there were even cases of when people were going to go to the area where the protest was of their, COVID apps suddenly mysteriously turning red. And that meant they couldn't access,
Oh,
subway
that was
or
the Henan
transportation.
Bank one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, bank failure is not an unknown thing in China now, too.
No.
But
It reminds me of It's a Wonderful Life.
the good thing about the mortgage protest is that a lot of it was like people just basically boycotted paying their mortgages.
Yeah, they
so,
just stopped paying.
So this is a kind of protest that it's very hard for the CCP to stop.
Hmm.
It's not like you can go stop a bunch of people on the street or you can keep them from traveling because their COVID app turns red or something like that. It's like literally, how are you going to force them to pay it?
Yeah, like arrest them.
Well, I have a solution to that, which is China's new digital renminbi currency. So once China fully implements its digital RMB, then they'll have direct control over everyone's money, no matter where it is.
So they could just take it from you whenever
Exactly.
they
They'll
want to.
just help you repay the mortgage as they feel you are obligated to do. So I'm a big fan of the government controlling digital currency. By the way, I think that's a great way to make sure that people don't have the freedom to do terrible things like protest.
That's true. Well, I know in response to the mortgage protest, the CCP was like, "All right, we'll let you not pay mortgages for 6 months." It's like you're already not paying. we'll let you not pay.
Yeah. I mean, and we'll also crack down on the Evergrandes and other real estate companies by loaning them money.
Yeah. Let's solve debt with more debt.
Yeah.
It really is like, what's the Simpsons thing about digging a hole?
Oh, it's dig up, stupid.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. This is the thing about the Chinese Communist Party and how it runs the economy. It's like a boat on the water and it's sinking and there's a bunch of holes spouting water and they're like desperately trying to like stick their finger in the holes. And so far they've done a pretty good job of it. They've got a lot of fingers.
Yeah, but they also have
tentacles.
they have a lot of foreign money
Yes.
that is bailing out the water in the boat.
It's like sponges
Yeah.
absorbing
Yeah.
the sea of debt.
Yeah. So
Well, and that's why American companies like BlackRock should keep investing in China.
Yeah.
Because it'll keep these problems at bay.
especially since BlackRock is investing other people's money.
Yes. Well, that's the trick. Always invest the sucker's money and not your own.
Yeah, that's probably very true. But hey, who we really have to thank for this wonderful economic relationship between China and the U.S.?
Henry Kissinger?
Maybe. But also that great reformer,
Oh, I see where
that
you're going.
pinnacle of a man, Jiang Zemin. who died this year. That's one of the other big stories. Yeah. Yeah, this situation is largely because of his colorful antics and the willingness of Western powers to ignore all the genocide.
Like, it's almost crazy because Jiang Zemin, like he sort of rose to power after he supported the 1989 Tiananmen massacre. And after Deng Xiaoping died in the mid-90s, Jiang basically fully took over. And there's all this like footage and photos of Bill Clinton with Jiang Zemin, and like they're sort of working together. And Jiang was like, yeah, like we love working with the West, and it'll help us
He
reform.
could recite the Gettysburg Address.
I mean, he could speak English too.
I mean, that comes with reciting the Gettysburg.
Yeah,
Address,
well,
right?
no, you could have just phonetically memorized it.
Well, I mean, he could speak some English. I'm not sure how super fluent he was, but he liked to drop English phrases.
So naive. He became a meme.
Yes. And actually, after he died, a lot of people were posting that video clip on YouTube. I mean, on Twitter. I understand. I mean, we put that on YouTube and it has like millions of views.
Yeah, where he's just like freaking out at like a Hong Kong reporter who asks like a pretty banal question. He's like, yeah. That's the one where he's doing like this crazy.
But the point is, he got Western companies to invest, and moreover, he got the leaders of the free world to agree that it was the right thing to do to let China into the World Trade Organization, which opened the door for massively more
They would
investment.
eventually reform.
I think it's like when Deng Xiaoping put on the cowboy hat. Remember that like photo of Deng in the cowboy hat as this
don't.
like, it's used as an iconic like, oh, China's changing now after Mao. Like Deng Xiaoping, the guy who started the reform and opening up stuff, right? He's wearing a cowboy hat. Jiang Zemin wearing a tricorn hat from like when he was in Colonial Williamsburg. Just the idea that, oh yeah, like China's going to become more like us. Yeah.
How'd that work out?
Technically true in some ways.
Right. And we also became more like China.
Yeah. So that is how.
Yes. So I mean, among other things, he basically launched the persecution of Falun Gong in the late 90s, and the whole, state-sponsored killing people for their organs and then selling those organs at state-run and military hospitals.
And not just that, but like we know this was something we found out from China researcher Ethan Gutman, that like Jiang built the Great Firewall, not personally, specifically as a means of like preventing Falun Gong practitioners in China from like getting stories out of the Chinese internet.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like all the mechanisms that Jiang Zemin set up to go after this, spiritual practice in China, right? So he sets up. So there's the mass surveillance, the internet firewall, the organ harvesting system, and now they're being used against all these other groups, and especially the Uyghurs. Right?
Well, I mean, you can't let a good mass surveillance system go to waste.
Yeah, but like once Jiang built these systems, they don't go away. They might target new people.
Yeah, they're definitely not going to go away because the CCP does not do truth and reconciliation, right? Like they don't look back on their past and go, whoops, that was a mistake. We should never do this again. There's none of that. So you run out of Falun Gong people because
you've killed them all for their organs, and now you go after the Uyghurs.
Then you have to find a new group to use it against.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I think even a lot of the zero COVID kind of surveillance wouldn't be there if that infrastructure hadn't been built with the persecution of Falun Gong, the persecution of Uyghurs, the general persecution of dissidents in China.
Right. I mean, certainly the mass internet censorship, which was sort of pushed forward by Jiang Zemin's desire to stop Falun Gong from spreading information.
I do think, though, that like no matter who was in charge and for what reason, eventually the CCP would have gotten there.
Oh yeah,
because,
I would agree with that.
There's
it wasn't
no
just Jiang.
way for the CCP to survive without that type of censorship apparatus.
Well, yeah, it's like the people who think Xi Jinping is the problem, and he is, but the bigger problem is the Chinese Communist Party.
Right. I mean, to a degree, it's like Jiang Zemin and Xi Jinping have used the CCP as their tool for repression, but also the CCP has used them.
It's like, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yes.
So the CCP is the game?
Yeah.
Okay. That's beautiful, Chris.
This analogy tracks. Trust me.
Yeah. So anyway, Jiang Zemin's dead. But you know,
Okay.
it doesn't change anything really in terms of China still being a terrible authoritarian regime.
But it is interesting to, kind of speculate how it might affect the people's favorite communist soap opera, General Hostility. Because Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin were in a, pretty intense political power struggle. Now that Jiang's dead, what will that mean?